Hello and welcome to the work session of the Historic District Commission meeting, Historic District, for April 17th. This is our third work session on looking at adjustments to our ordinance in regards to solar panels. What I was in the middle of saying, that I was told by the AV guys that this microphone should pick up everybody's voices, so we don't need these as much, but if they're in your way. Anyway, so last week we had a quick work, not a quick work session, but we had a work session looking at some of the language that Isaac had put together and drafted up for an addition to the exemptions or rewording to the exemption for certificate of approval, and an addition, sort of an additional paragraph here, or for administrative approvals of roof-mounted solar systems, solar energy systems. So I would love to, I think and since then Isaac has given us a little bit more information, and as well as some definitions for some of the things that we had been talking about last time, in terms of a question of what does minimally visible mean, what is a public way, some of these sort of things. So I hope that everyone has had a chance to review them and make some comments and edits. I don't know how we want to proceed, if we want to just kind of go around the circle, or if anybody has issues or ideas that they want to bring forward first, just let me know.
Just start with the first one.
Yeah, let's start with discussing the first one with the exemption.
So I had suggested one just drafting change that had more to do with the English language than anything else.
Yes.
And it was intended that the words after item number 3, all flat roofs with parapets, would be changed to are installed on flat roofs. It just makes the grammar more consistent.
Yep.
But the only question I wanted to raise is, do we feel that with this wording alone, we have, as a result, solar panels that are hidden behind a parapet? Because we did take, there is 3 feet above the roof plane, and then there's the size of a parapet, which may be 3 feet tall and would therefore hide the solar panel. Is there such a thing as a parapet that's less than 3 feet, and therefore between the two, you would end up with something that was less than 3 feet tall but could still be seen over the parapet? Because this is an or statement, not an and statement. So I'm just throwing that out as a remote but possible on historic building where they weren't dealing with building codes that made really high parapets.
I would say it's a relatively safe bet the way that you're approaching this thing, in as much as most of our flat-roofed historic buildings are actually pitched, or when they were constructed were pitched. And the cornice was always developed on the front of the building, and they pitched off to the back, which is going to put them in an unseen area, so to speak. So I don't think we're heading for anything dangerous there. But I've not done a full survey of parapets downtown either.
The other thing on flat roofs is if you're in 2 or 3 feet, to be able to see them is very hard, even if you didn't have a parapet.
And one assumes that if they're angled up so that they have a better
then you
relation
might.
to the sun, that angle would not be more than 3 feet above the plane, and
I see.
therefore between the setback and the parapet, we've probably covered what we're concerned about.
Technically, there are no flat roofs. It's a low slope roof. So for technical jargon.
Okay.
So that's all fine. I just wanted to clarify that in case,
Sure.
we're dealing with professionals. And so, yeah, I have no problem with that language. That works for me. And
Yeah, I mean, I had also, instead of that number 3, all flat roofs with parapet, would just say, or is located on a flat roof or low slope
So,
roof with a parapet. And I was trying to think about, I think probably the potential visibility, well, first of all, this exemption says where it's not visible from a public way. So if it is pitched higher, then it has to come back to us because it's not in this. But I can't think of very many one-story flat-roofed buildings that we have around, and that's where I would think that it would be you'd have the greatest potential for seeing something if it were down low, but.
Sure.
Middle, Maplewood Avenue, corner of Dennett, that garage that we grappled with.
Yes,
for a
that's the
period
only
of
one I
time.
could think of, yeah. But, you know, they're just a rare form, so,
even so, I don't think you'd see a
No.
panel up there if it were flush with the roof.
Well, you do, coming down over the hill from Dover, as they say, or Dover, you'll get more of a view of that, but it's confused by the other buildings around it also. There's just, we professionally look at our town from every angle we can all the time.
okay, so if everyone is comfortable with those
Could you
language
read it
changes-
with that language?
Sure.
Yeah,
Do
what's
you
the
wanna
grammar
read what
part
you
still?
have?
Yeah.
Seems a little strange.
Number 7?
The whole thing.
So I'll read it as it's revised in its entirety. All right, so exemption item number 7 would now read as placement or replacement of roof-mounted mechanical or electrical equipment and ventilation terminators and roof-mounted solar energy systems where the equipment, 1, is not located on a roof surface that faces or is visible from a public way, 2, does not extend more than 3 feet above the roof plane, or 3, is located on a flat or low-sloped roof with a parapet.
Okay, yeah, you got rid of that, all flat roofs. Yeah. Are located. All right, no, that sounds better. All right,
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's fine. Most of the panels are 4 feet. And if they're at a 42-degree angle, I tend to think that they
Yeah.
wouldn't be at 36 inches in height. Be close, but as long as they're back.
good.
I'm just wondering, Isaac,
Yes.
if this is a series of ends and that the last one is not an or.
You are correct, so it would be 1 and 2 or 3.
Yep.
Flat
That's,
roofs.
that's really I think what is the intention here.
Okay.
Is to keep it with that, but make it its own separate
Yeah.
Yep.
function.
That's a separate thing. Okay.
All right.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on. All right, so let's get to the administrative approvals. I wanted to bring up some concern from the planning department and the legal department about about what really makes it to be an administrative approval. And reading the language that Isaac had struck out, that was the original language, made me remember and realize that administrative approvals were originally instituted to help projects that had already been approved come back and make those little changes, like additions of vents, light fixtures, stuff like that, so that they didn't have to come all, back over for a whole administrative approval, or from a whole public hearing, because generally, the project had already been approved, so nothing was really changing. Since then, and I think probably what happened is before administrative approval, we had consent agendas. And probably what had happened is those two things kind of, in practice, got melded. So that the consent agendas for little projects kind of became administrative approvals along with previously approved projects. Which is why that several of us, many over the years, every once in a while will say, hey, why is this an administrative approval? This needs to be a public hearing. So I think it's a good time, now that we're adding something to an administrative approval, it's a good time to talk about what administrative approval is and should be. I think that, you know, we've had several people make good points that if it's, even if it's a small project that will, you know, is kind of silly to bring to a full public hearing, it's still, if there's a change in somebody's property, it needs to be noticed, and the neighbors need to know about it, and stuff like that. So, and it's a lot of pressure on Isaac or whoever else in the planning department is trying to make that call. So I think we need to define it a little bit better. And, you know, could we do something where it's like, go back to the previously approved projects, can come back, and have another section of mechanical equipment? Because that seems to be the bulk of our other administrative approvals, are like the compressors and mini splits and, you know, pipes or whatever, and really just mechanicals and little things. So, yeah, I wanted to bring this up before we really get into that, to kind of talk about the whole together.
We used to have a criteria, I haven't seen it lately, for bringing up work sessions, and it was a dollar amount. I think it was
Yeah.
$50,000 or something. Any projects that are over that need to, you know, be a public hearing, but I'm wondering if that would be a way to deal with some of this anyways. Because some of the projects do, I mean, some of these administrative approvals do seem rather large, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know if a dollar amount can, yeah, I think that we've maybe have taken away the dollar amount because it fluctuates. You'd have to constantly be keeping up with inflation. So,
A typical residential photovoltaic system is running $25,000.
right,
So what would your lower limit be?
yeah. So maybe we do need to look at type of application and look at it that way. And if it is a little, you know, somebody wants to you know, change the front door surround or something like, or some small part, the steps, the side steps or
Yeah.
something like that, maybe, even though it would should be a fairly easy conversation for us, maybe that still needs to come to us as a public hearing, just so that neighbors know what's going on. We're legally sound, we've advertised it, all of that stuff.
Right now, they're reviewed by Isaac, and they come two ways, either recommended or approved. So that's sort of two classes of AA, and then we,
Right.
even the recommended, we eyeball them, and so I think we're
Yes.
gonna pick things out.
Yeah.
So actually, there's an exemption, right? So there's the exempt, what we didn't even know about.
Yep.
Now we got the AA in 2 degrees, one that he thinks is more complicated and one he doesn't. We still review all the AAs.
Yes.
And then 3 is the big one.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you need to make
I
big
think-
changes on that.
And we would still always have the option to pull administrative
Right.
approval like we do and talk
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
However, what we've seen in the past is that sometimes we'll end up doing that, but if it is kind of a bigger project that, you know, is on that line, we'll talk about it, we'll bring it up and talk about it and vote on it, but neighbors, public, anything has no idea that that's come before us and it's time to talk about it.
The only way they would know about it would be agenda.
Right.
So it isn't an automatic notification.
But you'd have to,
Yep.
if, you know, you'd have to check the agenda every month
Yeah.
on your own to see if anything is coming.
So the.
How many, oops, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, no.
How many AAs do you get? Do you just tell them that's too much?
What do you,
Don't you
like-
do initial review, someone says,
Yeah.
I would just like this administrative approval, I'm gonna demolish the house. You mentioned to them the no.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
sure you
So
do, right?
so we try to, go through and flag all of them. I think, one thing, because it's written a very specific way and that line has been blurred a little bit, I think we've just found ourselves where maybe, as Reagan was saying, some things are kind of on the fence a little to one way or the other.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to do a little bit of a better job at signaling those larger projects out. But certainly we do have a lot of mechanicals that come to us that are smaller scope. If they do involve boundary lines, those do have to get approved by the Board of Adjustments, so those are noticed and advertised that way, which I think is one reason why we've done mechanicals as an administrative approval. And then we've also used it largely, for those really small scale projects, like someone who wants to redo the deck boards on their rear deck or something. But, yes, I think what you're saying is right, is, those larger projects, if it's, windows or siding or something of that nature, that kind of automatically pushes it.
So they don't have to pay for the administrative approvals, they don't have to do the registered letters?
No.
No.
Correct.
So by you
Just for
making
the
that
work session
decision,
and
you know,
public
that's-
hearing.
Yeah.
that adds something to their project, but say Levy.
Yes,
So,
Margot?
I don't want to spend too much time on this,
Right.
Because we have all the other
Right.
stuff, but when I think about the administrative approvals I've seen since I've been here, the things that I would start to be concerned about is when you have a project like 410 Islington, which had,
Yep.
building after building after building, and then, a little further down the road, the Italianate, each one of those projects had things that came up in the middle of construction after the project had been approved. And in some cases, it was something very, very small. The slope of the roof had to change by 2 inches because of some construction requirement. And then on the other end was, completely changing the back or the surround of the building or the way that something appeared in the front. And those are two very, very different effects on a neighbor. And so I don't have an answer as to how to parse that out. But I do think that there has to be a recognition that at some point, a project that's been approved on paper is starting to not look like what it was approved on paper. And that's when, a neighbor might stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, that is not what I signed on for when I said that I was in support of something.
Has that ever happened?
What?
With the Italianate?
Or just in general, has a neighboring piece of property come back to you and said,
You mean
how did
after
this
like
happen?
multiple administrative approvals have been
Yes.
granted or such? In my time, I've not had it, a specific, this exact change totally ruined it for me as a neighbor.
Okay.
I'm sure there might have been some people who didn't ring
Sure.
my phone or send me an email, but.
Well-
With the Italianate building, I'm glad you brought that up, Margot. I remember that we pretty much stopped them right in the middle of their project because they put small windows on the first floor. Here you have a building with 9-foot ceilings and has, rather large 1850 style windows, and here they got these little 6x6s stuck in there. Where did they come up with that?
I think you touched on to that with the fact that they didn't need to have tempered glass in them because they were far enough above the floor where the original windows were not.
Yeah,
I mean, that was your take on that. I think you were right.
yeah.
So, just to bring, this is a very good concern that you've brought up, but I just will point out that the language in this, as it said, is that provided that the code official, or whoever, Isaac, determines that the modifications do not alter the overall quality or character of the structure. So there is language in there to say, like, as long as these changes don't totally change the project of what was approved, then it's fine. So again, there are still some qualifications in there.
Why don't we table this?
Sure. Yes, I mean, we can certainly add, let's worry about the section about solar panels now, but think about this. This is something that we can bring up at any time too for change.
Right, this could be a few months down the road. It was brought up by Peter Stith and Jillian that if, thought, maybe we we should
Yep.
consider looking at that. So I wanted to introduce that as,
Yep.
to get it in everyone's head. But I agree, we can leave that out for
Yeah.
now and just focus
'Cause that's a lot.
on the remainder.
We do, we have a deadline for
What exactly
this
did
section.
they say? Peter and Stephanie, what did they say as far as, because if this is an ordinance change, it was my understanding that this was going to go in front of the council on May 5th.
Our-
Right,
Yes,
so they had suggested that we change this language here, which we're not going to be
It's not-
working on
we're not gonna worry about that right now.
for this charge.
Yeah.
But if the ordinance changes, I'm just saying that it's not something we want to change again a month later.
Why not?
No, it's just, but it's a different section, and it's not, I mean, I think
This is
these,
very minor
these changes go through all the time.
Not the solar, but
Right.
the language, the specific language changes can happen routinely.
Right.
Personally, myself, I think that we should discuss it, and if we want to change it, it should be done right now. That's what I'm thinking.
You know,
Let's see if we can
I
get-
think since I just introduced this, though, we just introduced this idea, and we've got a deadline on the
Yeah.
solar panels, let's do that. Ordinance changes go through on a rolling basis all the time, so, you know, I don't want to drag it out too long, any sort of like,
I would agree 100% with what Reagan just said, and I'm going to digress here for about 2 minutes. But over the last week, I called around because I've referenced some other towns and what they do. I mentioned, I think, before Newburyport, Newport, Rhode Island, Concord, Mass. I actually downloaded a document from Newport, Rhode Island, and they still review everything. Their language, incidentally, is very close to what we have, and I think we have something that's really, really good. And I'll just pass this around, but so you can read it. But the funny thing is, we're actually kind of on the forefront, because these other towns are still reviewing everything. And of those 3 towns, only Newport, Rhode Island actually has guidelines. Ironically, their guidelines, Reagan, are pretty much dead on what you've done.
Thank you.
So I think you've got something really, really good here, and I think that gives you some documentation.
Yeah.
And also some ammunition for Isaac to say, look, we're at the forefront of this compared to 3 historic towns, so.
yeah, I think everything that we've reviewed and read are all, what we're trying to do is just
Yeah.
bring us up to make sure that we're on par with all of the other standards that are currently out there. Thank you for bringing it, so we can all take a look at that. All right, so if we're gonna focus on 10.633.32, I have a few sort of language changes, but I would love to hear thoughts and opinions, especially on sort of the definitions that Isaac found. I'm assuming that you found these from some of the other documents that we've looked at?
Yes, and some I kind of pieced together, so don't take those,
Yeah.
you know, feel free to
Yeah,
change
we
those.
can-
You know, they're not here to stay, so to speak. They're very much just a starting point, just to get the ball rolling.
Okay, great.
I had one immediate comment on the minimally visible. And
Yes.
that was the considering seasonal foliage. And I wasn't sure which way considering was intended in this
Right.
particular case. Meaning that if it is seasonal foliage, then it should be discounted, because when it's off-season, it's not hiding anything.
Right.
So I don't know whether this was intended to say that the existence of seasonal foliage was to be viewed as obscuring, or the other way around, or if it's just something that's supposed to be taken into consideration.
That was the intent of the, or the definition that I used. So, as I said, you know, if that's not something that we think fits or works well here, we could certainly take that out and
Because the other issue with regard to foliage is seasonal or not, if a pine tree dies and it was hiding the solar panel and it comes down, poof, that's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think we could add another sentence to that even, just to make that clear, to say, you know, the interpretation, the intent is to not have shielded elements placed to create a distraction. It has to, you know, nobody's gonna, it doesn't count if somebody plants a bunch of trees there to hide it and make it minimally visible.
Agreed. I mean, you can't rely on something like that.
And as we heard from Carrie Votro at our last meeting, minimally visible is general you know, a term that's used everywhere, but not really defined anywhere. So
Lots of definitions.
so there are lots of definitions. We can kind of piece together our own definition that works for our district. I do want to point out, you've got not visible from a public view. I think the language that's in there is the public way. So it should be a public way, and a public way has a definition of being like a street, a road, a sidewalk,
Yep.
something like that. So
Any portion of a public street, sidewalk immediately adjacent to the property,
Yep.
or place in which the public has right of
Right.
access, yeah.
right. So it's not like a public view, like,
Your
you know,
backyard.
a
Yeah.
fire tower is a public view, but it's not.
Right,
that's not what we're
right,
talking about
right,
here.
yeah.
But we did run into trouble on the Newcastle Avenue project with Ball Street. And it seemed like, at least in conversation, not amongst the commissioners, but in large, that there were those people that were willing to discount Ball Street as being a public way.
Could I correct? I think what people were trying to say is that the rest of Ball Street was not in the historic district.
Right.
And they were trying to make the argument that the people behind that particular structure not being in the district, therefore were not.
To that end, back when Steve McHenry was putting the Circle Furniture Building up on Bridge Street, I had a problem with some of the views on the back of it. And I recognized that I was standing not in the historic district, at least at that time, when I was making those views. And I went to see Sully, not that he's God, but I went to see Sully because he's the person that picks things up and carries them forward and that like that. And he said, his interpretation was, nowhere in it did it describe where you were looking at the historic district from. That you could see it, that was it there. It didn't change whether you were standing in it or not. So,
I agree. I was just saying that I think people.
I'm just,
Yes.
little
Well,
things you pick up. I don't even play a lawyer on TV, but it,
This definition would be a public way.
Right.
Yep.
With no conditions. No public way within the historic district. It is
It
a
would be
public way.
public way, yeah.
And that Newcastle one, the owners tried to claim that the three houses were not complaining, that they
That's
were
correct.
happy with it, but that they're never gonna be there all their lives either. So it is public way, and it, you know, it was not a real, when you live on the corner, you don't have a backyard.
Okay, I'm trying not to get involved in Newcastle Avenue.
Yeah, we don't need to talk anymore about
Okay,
it. This
good.
is an administrative
Yeah.
discussion,
that
not for,
as a
specific projects.
Give us a definition of public way that I
Yeah.
thought
yeah, okay.
was worth pursuing.
Right.
All right, so we've got that covered. Who else has changes, suggestions, comments on any of the 1 through 5?
Oh, not on definitions anymore?
Well, do you have any comments on the definitions? I'm happy to hear it.
No, I'd like to hear you go through them and
Are we striking foliage? Strike that line?
Yes.
Okay.
Which one is it?
What's that?
Find it again.
And minimally
five?
visible,
Oh, and minimally visible, okay.
the last three words.
Well,
Yep,
you know,
last three
Actually,
words.
actually now I'm going to take back what I said because when I read this again, I think what it's saying is that when you go out to determine visibility, you should look at the foliage.
Oh, the seasonal foliage. I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
So in a sense,
it's almost like it's the negative of it.
Yes, I agree
The
with you.
fact that it is foliage and that it's hiding something should make you think twice that it is not actually minimally visible.
Interesting.
You know, there's a,
Here we are.
Witchcraft.
I think that we could talk about shielding elements as kind of a term, which are either parts of the building that, you know, maybe there's a dormer or something that shields it, as well as foliage, and then,
Non-permanent shielding materials,
Somebody could take the dormer off.
or park a tractor-trailer truck next to it.
yeah.
Maybe just,
So, again, you know, I think it's a valid thing to keep in, but again, we could put in some sort of statement to say, you know, the intent is not to have shielded elements placed or put there to create a visual distraction, or,
Well,
well, or maybe take seasonal foliage out of that sentence and just make it a new sentence and say
Yeah.
seasonal foliage will not be considered when determining
as
minimal
shielding.
visibility.
Yeah.
I might be going too
And then
far
you're
down a
done with
rabbit hole, but we screen condensers. It's possible that if you had a screening that was approved as part of the application, you could screen the panels.
That's fine. This is just a definition of, this doesn't actually,
Okay.
you know, this is just a minimally visible definition. And so we could have another definition of a screening element, you know, if you wanted to.
This is, what we're talking about here is Isaac's toolkit
Right.
for
Yep.
administrative approvals.
That's right.
It's not your criteria as a commissioner reviewing an application.
Right.
What about evergreens?
They die.
Or get blown
Little
over.
people.
God bless them.
Yeah.
The what?
So shielding elements. We can
Foliage,
work.
foliage is not
The thing
considered.
is, seasonal foliage
Yeah.
and
Oh.
screening is gonna cut in the effectiveness
Yeah,
of your
how about-
solar
how about
panels.
seasonal
You got a big
foliage.
tree there, they're not gonna work very good. So not
And
many
seasonal
people
foliage
get
is
into
That's a
that.
good point.
All right,
Yeah.
can I bring it to focus here? How about, you know, something along the lines of foliage is not intended to be a screening element?
Sure.
You can keep that sentence just like it is.
Okay, good.
Are we all okay with the character defining features? The overall shape of material, its materials, shape of the building, its materials, craftsmanships. Interior spaces does not pertain to us, we can take that out.
Oh, yep.
Interior spaces and features.
Do we want to keep this section environment? I mean, I feel like that might be part of like the landscaping, the foliage factor.
Defining features about whether or not they are appropriate for the style of the building.
That's, I think that's a burden that you're putting on Isaac.
Is it?
I think that's inappropriate. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Again, this is Isaac, or Isaac, whoever follows him. This is their toolkit that we're talking about now.
So, you know, one thing that we have bumped into before is, for instance, a two-story federal type of building that I believe was on the corner of Middle and somewhere near that market there. And it had Victorian features on the front, over the door, canopy, et cetera. And is that the defining feature of that building?
It would be one of them. Yeah. Because that's, you know, one of its historic details.
We strongly support that the concept that our historic buildings remain historic, having been changed and altered in the past, that not every building looks the way now that it did when it was constructed. But we seem to want to exclude things that happened in the 20th century with vinyl siding, so.
Yeah, we do, yeah. And asphalt roof shingles.
Yes.
And the whole thing down on Mechanic Street, Wentworth Coolidge Mansion.
Anyway,
All right.
Not Coolidge,
Gardner,
Yeah.
yes,
you know what happened to that.
yes.
Okay, guys.
It's not that funny, it's actually something that seriously happened, but it's against what we're saying. And yet it's now one of the most respected buildings, and you have to pay money to go through it.
Well, in,
it's not
in the
Well, it's
preservation world, there are many different avenues to go that are, there's no one right way to do things. It all depends.
the historic district.
Do you want to move on to
Yes.
secondary structure, or do you want to talk about this?
Any more discussion on minimally visible? No, I think we've gotten through that.
You got a percentage issue?
You know, the other thing we could do is to put a percentage on it, which I feel like is gonna be hard to calculate, but to say, you know, partially visible as in 75% or something, but I think that that's gonna get,
Well, how are we gonna quantify?
yeah, yeah.
Well, it depends
If
on
you
how
have
tall you
20,
are, too.
2050, it's gonna be
That,
less.
that might be something
bigger.
that's
I
better
can-
handled
that's a
when we
tough one.
do guidelines.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah, I
good
think
guideline thing.
you need a little wiggle room.
With regard to secondary structure,
Yep.
the one issue that I have here is with, particularly in this town, carriage houses. If we were located somewhere else, I'd be worried about the pole barns, but
Sure.
I don't think we have a pole barn. There are some barns, but I'm concerned about some of the carriage houses. They have architectural features, and they're so important to the buildings themselves, even if they may not be particularly grand, but they make up a part of the whole building and the history of the building, and I'd be a little concerned about slapping some solar panels on them without having a discussion. And if this is meant to give Isaac the guidelines that says this is when it doesn't have to come, I think we should take carriage houses out.
How about, but it says of which it is incidental to the use of the principal structure. So I would think,
Are we talking definitions, or
No,
are we talking
yeah,
number
are we on
5?
definitions
I'm
or
talking
about
number
secondary
5?
Definition of secondary structure.
well, it
No,
does
but
have
this
carriage
is
houses.
these are just definitions.
Right, we're going through definitions. And
That's an acceptable definition of a secondary structure.
Okay.
I also wanted to bring up the question of whether we actually need number 5, whether we need to talk about
okay.
secondary structures, pull them out separately at all, because we already have, in general, number 1,
Agreed.
saying, you know, it can be put on there, meeting these criteria.
Right, if it was a secondary structure and it met 1 through 4, it would be admin approval. And if
Right.
it didn't meet 1 through 4, it would have to come as the public hearing.
Right.
And we could still discuss and vote to deny if it was not, for whatever reason, applicable for that particular property.
I agree with that because it keeps it as simple as possible, just having 1 through 4. Because 5, I think, creates a loophole that you could drive a truck through.
Yeah, and it gets a little,
Great.
Okay,
The only reason it was put in there was some sort of deal that, well, if you have a historic house, but your garage is only
Yeah.
20 years old, well, then it's okay to put your solar panels on that garage,
but we still would want to review that, I would
which I agree with.
anyway, just depending on the location of that garage, is it proud of the
Because it may not
home,
be
is it,
minimally visible.
Right.
Okay,
so,
I'm fine, yeah.
So maybe we
That's
just
more
get rid of
conservative.
number 5 altogether?
Well, that's our disjointed, do we still need our disjointed panels?
I think it's covered.
I covered that
In number
one.
one.
Say that?
Yeah, I added that into my
Oh,
number
okay.
5 just to make it
Yeah.
more clear, but
Yeah.
that makes it even better for
and
me.
I was gonna,
Okay, there it is, yeah,
I
I'm
had
sorry.
some
you're
cleanup.
right.
Okay,
And speaking of the disjointed, I had some just kind
Yeah.
of clean up
Oh,
for the
please, yes.
text of that. For example, symmetrically placed or evenly spaced rectilinear arrays. So it's rows and columns it's not really how you talk about it. So
Okay.
I had somebody tell me how you talk about
okay,
arrays.
Okay, good.
perfect. That sounds
That's
better
not
because
the language that I
Sure.
know.
And the word
Yeah.
array by itself
Yeah.
describes
It
order.
means something.
I like that word array, it's a good word.
All right, so we'll strike 5. Then we don't need a definition of secondary structure.
Should I replace solar panel with solar array? Would that sound better to?
Well, no one's gonna put a panel up, if
Right.
that's the change.
Right, so if that's just to keep it consistent throughout all of our.
I think disjointed panels is fine, because you're talking about the
Yeah.
specific panels.
Okay.
But where else were you thinking?
I think just like the placement of solar panels, solar array.
Yeah,
placement of-
solar
What number are
array
you talking about?
for number 2.
Number 2 now.
You can say-
Okay, I'll look at that if it makes sense,
Yeah.
then, yeah.
Well, one thing that is coming up in, with single panels, for instance, is battery, small battery storage. So it is available, they're advertising them all over the place now, if you know where to look. And to have these, you get a solar panel and you get a 1 kilowatt hour battery, and it's got an inverter, so it switches over to AC power. And you have this thing essentially to run your sump pump, or, it's really a
Yeah.
one-item type of feed, or maybe your furnace or whatever you feel like.
Yeah.
And we might be bumping into a single panel.
Well, that sounds like it'd be something that's a lot easier to hunt.
And the one thing we haven't really mentioned, I'm not sure if everybody has gotten a chance to go down to Mark Street and look at those panels on the building, and wondering if that's something that we should encourage. You would have noticed that they actually had a bevel piece of, I assume it's metal, might be plastic, around the panel array, say it's 4 panels, and then it's covered over with a very fine mesh cloth.
I think it's something that we should add to the guidelines, when we redo the
That
guidelines.
did,
to
looking
encourage
back at it, that did seem like a Cadillac proposal. It had all of the bells and
Yeah.
whistles, the squirrel
Yeah,
guards. the
it was
screening.
definitely more expensive for the customer, however.
And
Is it
5% less
something that
effective, I
we
think
think
they
is worth it mentioning? I mean, is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it looks good. I mean, yeah, I think it's a good. Okay.
Just a quick clarifying, if we're getting rid of number 5, do we need to worry about the definition of secondary
don't think
structure?
so.
Okay, just,
How about
I
the
just-
slate and shingle? Because that's Rick's big thing.
Yes, and I did,
Did you do that again?
no, but I wanted to clarify that. So number 2,
Yep.
we say the placement of solar panels,
Oh, there it is again.
associated
Yep.
support structures and conduit lines shall not
Cause damage.
cause damage, or, I kind of wanted to reword that a little bit, of character-defining architectural features of the structure, such as installation through slate or wood shingled roofs, and removal of chimneys, dormers,
Yep.
or alternating
Yep.
existing roof lines, because it's not,
Yep,
yeah,
I
just to
agree.
clarify.
I
That's-
agree.
That's what we intend.
Yeah,
We don't
right,
want to
that's
have
better.
the installation through
Yeah.
slate and shingle.
Right.
Would that allow them to remove them, though?
No, because that's still a character-defining feature.
Which,
The word alter, I mean, says it all.
Yeah.
Yep. Good.
Okay, perfect.
Something else that we haven't discussed is shingles, these solar shingles.
We just haven't seen any. Nobody's brought any to
No,
us.
no one's brought any to
So
us, but
I don't know what, I
but
don't
they
know what
will.
we would say.
there's 3 or 4 manufacturers now. It's not, such as, it was originally just Tesla, and because that's like $75,000 just to put some solar shingles on your house, nobody considered it, but, now like CertainTeed and a lot of the roofing companies are making these things.
Can you walk on them?
No, I would say
So
no.
it's, to meet the city's fire department's requirements, they'd need to have 2 different kinds of shingles in the same plane?
Exactly, that's one of the problems. Yeah, because, they're a little thicker than conventional.
I understand.
They're like an inch.
I thought they were also a larger
Inch and a quarter.
exposure too.
And then their exposure is like 12 inches or something. So essentially, they have to be placed on the roof first and then shingle all around them.
Would,
You know,
Does that make them minimally visible?
it all depends on
Depends
how
on how
bad,
vivid it is or
how
what they
bad
look
your
like, yeah.
eyesight is. If you're squinting and it's 7:30 at night, yeah, it's minimally visible.
would you be able to get the similar exposure and your asphalt shingle to match that, or would you be looking at
I think
two different, and would that actually bring your attention?
It's tough to anticipate something. we don't
I've
know
never even
anything
seen,
about.
I don't even think I've seen a photo of.
I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure it's gonna get it anywhere, but I
Right,
thought I'd
if,
bring it up.
I think if we end up starting to see more of those applications, we can kind of figure out where they should go, but, because we haven't seen any.
Right,
We
because they're not
actually-
offered free.
Right.
That's the
And I've
big thing.
seen, one company actually does have non-solar shingles that match
Oh.
their shingle. And that's good for valleys also. So only the solar shingles are in the middle of the roof. you know.
We actually have a building at
Yeah,
the
that's the
shipyard
way.
that has these shingles on them. And they don't match the other shingles that are part of the structure, but they're handled in a manner which is tasteful and well done in the pattern. It just seems like a unique shingle pattern within the larger roofing shingle pattern. Let's cross that bridge when we
Yeah.
get to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
because when was that put on?
That was put on about 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, they're changing already to get smaller and look more like it.
And to tell you the truth, I don't think they're functioning anymore.
Right.
And there's, it's
That's
about,
an important
You
consideration.
need a field trip.
it's about 150 square feet. And they look great, I mean, they really do, but I don't
Bring
think
us a
they're right.
picture.
I can't.
Oh.
I can't photograph on the shipyard.
Oh, okay. We don't want you to get shot. Never mind. Yeah.
They
If
have
you
to-
ever,
they have to
if
be
you
approved.
ever on the yard and you want to see it, it's right there, I can show it to you.
Yeah, I'll take a look. All right, so we read through number 1.
Yep.
Oh, and to say that systems should be minimally visible from a public way.
Yep.
I think it's just clearer than thoroughfare. And, right, so evenly spaced rectilinear arrays.
Yep.
Yes.
2, we got through. Number 3, any changes or thoughts? The only thing that I added was, shall be flush mounted to the roof and shall not be, I'll read it all out loud to anybody who's listening. Roof mounted solar energy systems shall be flush mounted to the roof and shall not be visible above the roof line of the primary facade.
That's what we have, right?
From the lot's frontage? Do we need to have from somewhere? Because we're, again, talking about visibility.
Yes, so if you just restrict it to the primary facade, you could end up with a situation where you have a gable running down a side street and somebody, there's the roof line and somebody does this. Is that covered by something else? It can't extend
Shouldn't be
above-
visible above the roof line?
Yeah, so it's not visible above the roof line, so if it sticks up then, and you can see it, then you can't do that.
But this says primary facade. Where does the roof line come
Oh, right.
To remain within the plane of the roof.
Sure.
in? Because as John rightly pointed out, there's a building on Jones Avenue that has,
Yes, yes,
Or
actually,
maybe we
extend
could-
beyond the roof.
So it should be,
I'm surprised wind doesn't take those things off.
should be flush mounted to the roof and remain within the, what did you say, the roof?
The plane of the
Plane
roof,
of the roof, the
Yeah.
roof,
Maybe they
the
didn't
roof
get a
plane,
permit.
the roof,
Yeah.
the geometry,
Area.
parameter of the roof.
Yeah. Something like that.
And do we want to keep and shall not be visible above for the primary facade, or just get rid of that?
I don't think we
altogether?
need to
Yep.
have that,
Okay.
because
Perfect.
that's,
Minimally visible, I think,
Yeah.
covers it. Yeah.
Right,
already
yeah,
addressed.
yep,
Yep.
yep.
And are we splitting hairs? Because it's not really flush mounted, it's on a rack. And
right, not flush mounted, but I think we use that term to try and simplify it, but
Yeah.
to say, within the same plane of the roof. Yeah. So, and then number 4, roof-mounted solar energy systems mounted on flat roofs shall be set back from the edge of the roof. And I just took out an angled as necessary, just set back from the edge of the roof to minimize visibility.
Yeah, that angled as necessary is kind of weird.
Yeah, and, yeah, who determines the necessary angle?
The necessary angle is 42 degrees.
Well, I think this came up in one of the documents that
It was
you.
the NPS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they
Okay.
had it, but if it doesn't apply
For
or
our-
work right here,
Right.
then yeah.
For our
let's-
climate, for our district, I think we can.
As a matter of fact, we're very lucky because most of our roofs are, if they're 7, 8, or 9 pitch, which most of our roofs are, that's in that degree range.
Right.
So we have, whereas like if you were in the Midwest where there's a lot of houses like this, then the solar panels have to kind of,
Yes, yeah.
Right.
I think the particular example that this came from was a building that had a parapet, and they were mounting the solar panels had to be angled in order to be efficient. And what they ended up doing is instead of putting them the long way, they turned them, so they were running horizontally. And by doing that, they were able to get the pitch that they needed, but not have it break the plane. And I think
okay.
That's an interesting
what
idea.
this was about.
You need a long roof, but.
It was a very industrial sort of building, and so they were able to do
Actually,
that.
Yeah,
it's
it's a good
the
solution.
same number of panels.
Yeah.
It's the same number of panels, just there, if you put them the long way, they'd just be further apart, because you wouldn't want to place them in shadow of the one in front of it. So it really, that really would pan out. Anyway,
There's that building off of Islington Street down by the button factory. That has a whole line of solar panels.
oh,
You know what I'm saying?
The open pit imaging.
And they're at the same angle as what used to be the light, clear story.
Yes.
Did we
That's,
go over just this thing?
Yeah, we
part,
can-
or do we have it? Okay.
architecture past recent.
Hines?
No. European.
So definitions?
No, we're just reminiscing here.
Evan Mullins.
Can we go now,
Port City
Money?
architecture. Port City architecture. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, well, it sounds like we've gotten through all 4 in our definitions. I just wanted to go back and let's read the initial introductory blurb just to make sure that's all set, which says, a property owner or authorized representative may submit for an administrative approval for the installation of roof-mounted solar energy systems, associated support structures, and conduit lines, provided that the application meets or exceeds the following requirements.
And 1 through 4.
You know what? We don't say anywhere about the conduit lines or anything being painted a color to match the field that they are against, or do we?
Or matching the shingles either.
This is intended to determine what makes it eligible for admin approval. We can still request in the admin approval, as part of the approval, that it be painted.
With a stipulation.
True
Right.
enough.
Yep.
Yeah, make that a stipulation.
Yep.
Yep.
cool, good catch.
Yeah.
Just like we do with, half screens and,
Not so bad.
You know, lots of people say
All right,
that.
well, I
They
think
all
I
do.
got most
Okay.
notes down, so what I'll do is
Alright.
tomorrow morning I'll quickly go over this. I'll send it out in case there's any just grammatical
Yes.
things.
Well, everybody take
Send
one.
that back out, but I do have to get it back to the planning board for their packet for Friday morning. So I've got tomorrow to turn it around.
Yeah.
So
Right.
just
And so again, the
sorry about
proc-
the quick turnaround.
So again, the process is that the planning board needs to review it, just to make sure that all the ordinance language is fine.
Yep.
Our public friend left, I was going to have him speak.
Bored them to death.
Right.
And as they review it, we'll also be sending it to the
City council.
city council. And I'll be there to present it to the city council on their May 6th meeting,
Good,
Yep.
good, good.
so.
You know, just looking at this, what is this, Newport?
Yeah, Newport, Rhode Island.
I'll be there.
These guys are worse than we are. They just don't really have
Sorry,
it.
need any help, please.
They, freestanding,
To do what I can.
Provided it's not visible, yeah.
yeah. These systems should be screened from the public right away with fencing, shrubbery, or other vegetation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Are they, must be talking about that.
So,
The point I was trying to make, all of it was, I was picking three towns comparable to Portsmouth, Concord, Mass, Newburyport, Mass, and Newport, Rhode Island. And of those three towns, only one even has anything written, and that's Newport, Rhode Island. So and they still require a full review of everything. And so we're really on the cutting edge, giving
Actually,
people
this
the
came
latitude
from
to say,
Newport,
hey, you can't see it, go do it.
It's not even an ordinance.
Are we on the cutting edge or the
This is
same?
wholly at an HDC.
I don't know. Anyway,
Depending on the argument.
So.
let you know in 20 years.
Empowered by the historic chairman.
So, great, thank you all for this. So and looking ahead, again, give some thought to what our administrative approvals should be. Again, you know, I'm kind of leaning towards some way to define it. We do need to address it, but we need to define it a little bit better so that, it's clear and legally sound what gets through administrative approval and what needs to come through public hearing. Maybe we need to do a consent agenda and an administrative approval. I don't know. But whatever, we'll be getting some feedback, I think, from the legal department too, to say how we need to define this and what we need to do. So think about that. And then, again, one of the things I will be presenting to the city council along with this is the intention to use some of the money that they have in the CIP for us to update our guidelines I think that we should try and get an entire new chapter for our guidelines, specifically on alternate energy, sustainability, energy efficiency, all of the things so that, because we've seen a few very good examples, but it's more than just solar panels and, you know, we always have the window discussion. There's always, you know, discussion of the storm windows, things like that. Even putting in guidelines and recommendations for different types of insulation, which you choose the wrong one in the wrong house and it could be really bad. So, just letting you know that that's, hopefully that is on the horizon as well, to be able to go through that.
Good.
So, we're gonna work you guys. Sorry, this is gonna be more than just.
Remind us that when you get that, we gotta get it back in 24 hours, you're saying, right?
By early
12 hours?
afternoon tomorrow, actually, yes. I'll try to get that out by about 12 o'clock, if
That will
not
just be
earlier.
for us to review.
Just to
There's no
review, just to,
vote.
you
No.
know, just to make sure I'm not throwing any wild cards in there that no one's prepared for. So,
fun guy.
so I'll get all those revisions taken
Sneak 'em
care of. I'll get
through.
that out to you, and then we'll get it off to the planning
Thank you.
board.
Yes, this is a work session, there's no voting, it's just making sure that we're in consensus here, and,
Which I think,
yeah, I think
Yeah.
we are.
Yep.
And,
Well, I would like to say that the reason that I'm, you know, talking and doing all of this is so that the best possible suggestions goes to the city council. So if I can help in any way, that's what I'm trying to do.
thank you, John.
There's been some suggestions and things in the paper that are pointing me and Rich out and as being political. This is not political. It's just a feeling that I have. And if anybody doesn't know, I've been here since 0, okay? And I was born over at the Navy Yard at the Naval Hospital. So I can't say I was born in Portsmouth. Yeah. So, yes, I do care very much about what we're doing, and I think that, you know, what we've got now is good.
Thank you.
You got your pictures in the paper, though. That was nice.
I must have missed all
No, I
this. I didn't
didn't.
see it.
Well, I think it's fair to say that we're all here because we care, and we're very devoted to our historic district. Nobody's here to
Right, right.
play political games.
Yeah, I
And
was
one of
just
the reasons
taking
we're
a
forefront
little
is
back,
it-
that's all. I was taking
City
it
council's
back.
trying to take it away.
Some-
And you asked last meeting, has anyone taken it away? And it's, we could be one of the first. The big one is Massachusetts, has
You and I can
the
say
largest historic district in the east. And it goes all the way from the top of the Cape all the way down to the islands.
certain that
And
that's how
now
they play in this game.
damn DeSantis is trying to take it away from the South Beach, the Art Deco. And he's using the idea that if a building fell down, you can, if you declare it shaky, you could demolish it and put something new in when that big building comes down. So he's looking at, you know, these great Art Decos and
Didn't we
trying
talk
to
about a building
demolish
like
them
that
and
last
build
week?
something new.
All right.
Yeah, they didn't give you an answer.
So, yeah, all right, it seems like we're dissolving into different
All right, yeah, no.
conversations. So
Ready to go.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reagan.
Have a good night.